Desire is not an obstacle to spiritual growth. True practice does not lie in running away from ordinary life, but in transcending desire while living right in the midst of it. This was the teaching the Buddha offered at the Serendipity Temple, shining a light on our inner confusion and conflicts. In our daily lives, we often feel troubled by our own wants and longings, sometimes assuming that a genuine spiritual path means cutting all ties to worldly concerns. Yet the Buddha used a simple yet profound example, just as a lotus grows from mud without being sullied by it, to show us the real meaning of practice. We do not flee from our desires. Instead, we become aware of them and rise above them, discovering a clear and peaceful mind in a world that is full of longing. Today, let us look into the Buddha's wise teaching and see how it can guide us to practice here in this very human realm, finding our own inner stillness. It was a spring afternoon when warm sunlight filtered through the curtains of the Serendipity Temple's great hall. The sun's rays, as if polished by countless centuries, fell gently without dazzling anyone. Specks of dust danced in the light, drifting down as a calm hush filled the air. In that stillness, it felt natural to hold your breath, as though every soft breeze and every floating particle had found a place to belong. Serendipity Temple was known across the kingdom as one of the most dignified Buddhist sanctuaries. That day, the king himself had eagerly invited the Buddha to teach, and devotees from far and wide came to listen. Monastics, lay followers, scholars, merchants, and even people from distant regions all gathered, some with serene reverence, others hoping to resolve their doubts. The air felt charged with silent expectation, as though every worldly sound had paused in anticipation. Although everyone was seated quietly, all eyes moved restlessly toward the front of the hall. Their expressions were filled with deep awe and endless curiosity about the Buddha's upcoming teaching. It seemed each person awaited a kind of inner cleansing. In the center of the hall, the Buddha sat calmly upon a lotus seat. He wore a simple robe and looked peaceful and poised, like a still lake that might seem motionless on the surface, but was, at every moment, flowing with boundless wisdom. His gaze seemed able to see into the hearts of all, as though no human worry or confusion could escape his insight. Yet beneath that profound understanding lay a compassion beyond words. His gentle presence made everyone forget the passing of time. A low murmur swept through the crowd, occasional whispers of admiration for the Buddha's wisdom and hopeful excitement about what might be revealed. Each person felt a subtle, unspoken pressure in the air, some sacred influence that moved them to bow inwardly. It was the profound respect held for the Buddha and a longing for truths yet unknown. The golden sunlight fell across the Buddha and his lotus seat, weaving his figure into a glow, as though a divine presence protected that sacred hall and all who came to hear his words. The Buddha sat in silence, a faint smile in his eyes, seeming to know every thought in everyone's mind, but in no rush to speak. Instead, he allowed the stillness to seep into every heart, offering a moment of peace and letting daily worries rest briefly. Then within that silence, a laywoman, both nervous and determined, stepped forward toward his seat. Her name was Sumati. She came from a prominent Brahmin family, yet deep inside she carried questions that no one had ever resolved. She had arrived at the Serendipity Temple that day seeking an answer, one that might change the way she saw her life. Her heartbeat echoed in her chest, each step feeling weighty. Her eyes flicked back and forth between the Buddha's serene figure and the crowd around her, as countless questions converged in her mind. Her hands trembled slightly, held together tightly, reflecting the turmoil she felt inside. Everyone in the hall focused on her with keen attention. She lowered her gaze, took a deep breath, and calmed her emotions. At last, she gathered her courage and stood before the Buddha. All eyes rested on her, and within her rose a small glimmer of hope, as if finally she might find the answer she had searched for so long. Sumati was born in the kingdom of Sewei, into a prominent Brahmin lineage. From an early age, she was immersed in sacred texts and had studied teachings on karma, rebirth, and spiritual discipline. She had grown knowledgeable and could effortlessly recite important scriptures, grasping the relationship between cause and effect in the path of practice. Her family was renowned for both spiritual devotion and learning. Each relative found their own place in religious understanding. Yet despite this firm grounding, Sumati carried one question she couldn't resolve. How to Practice While Balancing Marriage Responsibilities and Heartfelt Emotions. Her parents had taught her that real spiritual progress meant discarding every earthly desire to attain clarity and release. But she could never silence the inner voice that asked, "What about my duties in love and marriage? How should I handle those?" Growing up, she heard wise figures speak on the necessity of spiritual practice, but no one offered a detailed answer to her hidden doubt, whether love and marital intimacy hindered progress on the path. This question weighed on her like a heavy stone in her heart. She was convinced that the Buddha could give her clarity. After she married, Sumati's life was peaceful and happy. Her husband was a prosperous merchant in Sewe, well-to-do and successful. Their personalities complemented each other. They lived harmoniously, built a thriving family, and loved each other deeply. Late at night, when she saw him asleep with a look of utter contentment, she felt a warmth and comfort she had never known before. Yet in spite of appearances, wealth, status, a loving marriage, a harmonious home, there was a deep divide in her heart, a divide she called spiritual practice. As a devoted follower, she believed practice required giving up all worldly attachments, and it seemed marital closeness conflicted with that. The thought of physical intimacy in marriage unsettled her, bringing anxiety and contradiction. She wondered, if I dedicate myself to spiritual growth, do I have to abandon all of this? Should I become like a monastic, free of all earthly ties? But whenever she felt the honest warmth of love with her husband, she knew she couldn't simply cast it aside. Was there truly an unbridgeable gap between love and spiritual development? She often sat alone, head lowered in thought, struggling with a quiet sense of helplessness. Despite loving her husband deeply, the tension between spiritual dedication and worldly responsibility wore on her. Whenever she reflected late at night, she felt a sorrow beyond words. And then the Buddha came to the Serendipity Temple. News that the king had invited him to teach spread through Sumati's mind like a boulder thrown into a tranquil lake, stirring waves of hope within her. She sensed a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Perhaps on that day the Buddha would finally resolve her dilemma and show her how to practice in ordinary life, how to reconcile married intimacy with spiritual growth. Although she yearned for that resolution, her anxiety lingered. She was about to bear her deepest internal battles before the Buddha, and the thought made her heart pound and her palms damp with sweat. Standing before a mirror, she took a steady breath and glanced at her sleeping husband. She knew if this question stayed unanswered, she could never fully commit to a path of practice. Yet if the solution demanded that she abandon her intimacy or shake her idea of marriage, what then? Just then, her husband spoke softly. "Are you going to see the Buddha?" She turned to find him awake, concern evident in his gaze. "Yes," she said firmly, though tinged with hesitation. He smiled gently, encouraging her. "No matter the answer, I'll stand by you. If you choose, I'll walk with you." His words felt like a warm current moving through her. She looked at him deeply, and her resolve grew. She knew it was time to face the question that had weighed on her heart for so long. Sunlight again lit up the Serendipity Temple through its curtains, but today the glow seemed different, more urgent, as if foreshadowing a change. Sumati and her husband made their way through the crowd into the main hall, already filled to overflowing with listeners. A line of people wound like a flowing river, leaving no room to spare, and countless eyes focused on the Buddha, waiting for enlightenment. Sumati had sensed that this day would be extraordinary, but the reality of standing in that sacred space set her heart racing. Her hands trembled as she struggled to hold steady, anticipation and nervousness churning within. The Buddha remained on his lotus seat, calm and composed, his gentle gaze reaching everyone present. As Sumati and her husband came near, the Buddha acknowledged her with a kind look and a soft nod. In that moment, time seemed to stop, every eye in the room turning to Sumati. She took a deep breath, pushing down her inner turbulence, and stood before him with hands folded. Her voice quivered slightly, but her eyes shone with determination. She spoke. "Honored teacher, I have a question. If someone practices while living at home, must they completely renounce desire? And if one is married, does intimacy with a spouse count as a wrongful indulgence that obstructs the path?" The moment she finished, a hush fell over the hall. All attention was riveted on her, some people surprised, others puzzled, and still others admiring her courage. She had dared to raise the question of marriage and desire openly before the Buddha, bypassing any hesitation about custom or tradition. The mood, already solemn, became downright tense. Attendants and devotees froze in place, each breath caught in their throats. Everyone looked at her, waiting for the Buddha's answer. A small ripple of conversation flickered through some in the crowd, but quickly vanished, replaced by a deep silence charged with tension. It became clear that her inquiry wasn't just a personal question, but a challenge to the core of spiritual teachings, touching on the friction between desire, marriage, and the search for liberation. Some frowned and wondered if genuine practice could truly coexist with marital intimacy. Others felt relieved that at last, someone was brave enough to voice the issue openly. And still others waited keenly for the Buddha's response, curious to see how this compassionate guide would address a subject so central and direct. In that stillness, the Buddha regarded Sumati with kind eyes, letting a quiet pause fill the room. He did not rush to answer, giving her space to be present with her question. Sumati felt her anxiety grow, but also sensed a gentle encouragement in his gaze. She could feel the sweat in her palms and a few droplets forming on her forehead. Everyone watched, holding their breath as the Buddha calmly prepared to speak. Finally, with a serene warmth, he asked, "Sumati, what do you believe wrongful indulgence really is? And what does practice mean to you?" He did not give an immediate yes or no. Instead, he guided her to reflect on her own definitions. He was seeking her honest perspective and nudging her to find the key within herself. His voice carried no judgment, only boundless compassion and a wisdom that felt like a gentle breeze clearing away the fog in one's mind. The audience stayed silent, eyes on Sumati, hoping she would offer a clear, genuine answer. She felt the Buddha's calm guidance and was reassured. He was not dismissing her question, but leading her to discover her own insight. Sumati bowed her head, took a steady breath, and gathered her thoughts about the nature of unbridled craving and the meaning of spiritual practice. When she spoke, her voice was calm yet firm. "Teacher, as I understand it, wrongful indulgence is losing ourselves in desire, surrendering to it recklessly without self-control. Such unrestrained craving taints the mind and brings distress. Practice, on the other hand, involves containing those impulses, purifying body and mind, and reaching a peaceful and stable heart. It is a process of seeing through our attachments and arriving at wisdom and freedom." She paused and glanced at her husband, love and resolve shining in her eyes. "My husband and I have lived together for years, always with mutual respect. Neither of us has ever betrayed the other. Our bond is built on genuine care and understanding, not on reckless desire. I believe that kind of loving respect is part of our path. It doesn't feel like an indulgence we can't control. It feels like a shared commitment that helps us grow." Though her words were simple, they revealed her sincerity and deep thought. She never imagined she could speak so openly in the Buddha's presence. Yet she felt surprisingly calm as she expressed it. The Buddha smiled gently at her, his eyes reflecting a profound kindness, as if he already knew her heart. With a nod, he said, "Well spoken. Wrongful indulgence does not simply mean desire. It is losing mastery of ourselves, being unable to moderate or discern what harms us and others. True practice is recognizing the nature of our desires, purifying our hearts, and moving toward insight. Your respectful and loving bond is a genuine expression of kindness and generosity. Such qualities are themselves part of true spiritual growth." His voice flowed like a soft light, putting everyone at ease. Some listened quietly, absorbing his words. Those who had shared similar doubts found immediate relief. The Buddha continued, "Spiritual cultivation does not demand we abandon all human emotions or obligations. The household path differs from the monastic path, but neither is superior or inferior. Both are shaped by the conditions of each person's life. Your marriage is one such condition. It need not confine you. It can be a part of your spiritual journey, helping you see your own mind more clearly and deepening your wisdom." His words were like a pure spring, restoring hope to those weighed down by confusion. Many bowed their heads, pondering the Buddha's teaching. Unspoken questions found their first hints of resolution, Yet at that moment a young monk broke the silence, his voice soft but clear. Teacher, based on my understanding, it's often said we must eliminate all desires for our practice to be pure. If desire is an obstacle, does that mean we should completely cast it out so we can truly cleanse ourselves and reach liberation? His question trembled with both curiosity and concern. Once again, the central topic of human desire had been raised, this time from a slightly different angle. In the crowd, especially among those living in the world outside monasteries, the tension thickened. People wondered whether genuine liberation required removing every trace of desire. If we keep any worldly attachments at all, can we still move toward enlightenment? Like a stone tossed into still waters, the young monk's words rippled through everyone. Some nearby lay followers began to whisper their own fears. Is there room for any balance between the demands of everyday life and the call of spiritual clarity? Must we truly abandon all that is human in order to be free? Then a subdued cough rang out. Everyone turned to see a senior Brahmin stand up, his face stern and solemn. Though frail with age, his demeanor radiated a certain authority, and his voice resonated through the hall. Master, desire is the root of impurity. Once it arises, it consumes our minds, causing endless suffering. We must root it out entirely to be free from the misery of this world and to walk a path of purity and final release. His words echoed through the temple with force. He insisted that desire alone was the main barrier to spiritual practice, and that only through absolute renunciation could one become truly pure and move closer to liberation. Some in the crowd nodded in agreement, especially earnest monastics and strict lay followers who believed wholeheartedly that true spiritual cleansing required total eradication of desire. Others, especially those leading family lives, felt conflicted. They couldn't simply wipe away the affection and obligations that came with work, family, and close relationships. They wondered if this austere viewpoint was indeed the only way. In front of the Buddha, an impassioned debate was taking shape between different viewpoints. The tension in the hall grew heavy, interrupting the calm that had reigned before. People's expressions reflected a mix of anticipation and doubt, waiting for the Buddha's response to these clashing opinions. They realized this was about more than Sumati's personal dilemma. It went to the heart of the Buddha's teaching. How do we reconcile worldly entanglements with the quest for spiritual enlightenment? The air felt thick with suspense. Hearts beat faster as all eyes turned to the Buddha. After a moment of silent reflection, the Buddha stood up, stepped down from his lotus seat, and quietly walked outside toward a lotus pond that had long been tended around the temple grounds. A few startled monks and lay people followed. No one understood why he left so suddenly or why he hadn't addressed the debate right away. Was he waiting for a more fitting moment? At the pond's edge, the Buddha crouched and dipped his fingers into the water. The pond's surface reflected his figure. Everyone stood behind him, curiosity and a hint of anxiety building, sensing something meaningful was about to happen. The Buddha gently picked a fully bloomed lotus. Bathed in daylight, it was pristine white. Petals spread wide like a small miracle rising from muddy water. He raised the lotus over his head, looking at the onlookers with calm, luminous eyes as though about to reveal a deep truth. He paused, the lotus in his hands, a quiet smile on his lips. "Friends," he said at last, "this lotus was born in mud yet remains unstained. Do you think it simply escaped the mud? Or did it learn to dwell there without being soiled by it?" His voice pierced the silence like a bolt of lightning, electrifying every listener. That single question turned their minds inside out. The lotus was beautiful and pure, and in an instant, they realized the parallel. It flourishes in mire without losing its radiant essence. The Buddha's words could be heard at many levels, but above all, they illustrated the way a person can remain serene and pure while living in a world of desire. Some stood with heads bowed, reflecting deeply on that image. One might wonder, if desire and spiritual practice are so often seen as opposites, is withdrawal really the only solution? Or should we learn to live in the midst of these human experiences, finding a purity that doesn't depend on running away? The Buddha, noticing they were lost in thought, smiled gently and returned to face them. He rested the lotus in his hand with care. His gaze was at once profound and consoling. "Real practice," he said softly, "is not about fleeing the world, but about finding stillness of mind within it. A lotus doesn't distance itself from the mud. It draws nourishment from that environment, yet remains bright and unblemished. It doesn't reject its place in the world. It simply stays true to its nature. Each word landed like a clear beam, lighting up the hearts of the crowd. Practice does not demand a total rejection of human desire. Rather, it involves seeing desire for what it is, knowing its causes, its effects, and cultivating the wisdom to live harmoniously without being overpowered by it. Just as a lotus remains unsullied in muddy water, we can live and grow in a world of wants and needs while maintaining our clarity. We are not called to resist everything or cast away every desire, but to awaken to the present moment and remain free in it, unbound by greed, anger, and ignorance. A wave of relief spread among those gathered. The tension dissipated, replaced by a sense of hopeful calm. That simple lotus metaphor soothed doubts and provided a path forward. Sumati gazed at the Buddha's lotus with tears in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but of grateful release. For so long she had thought marriage and spiritual practice might never align. Now she saw how the heart could stay pure even in worldly life. She turned toward her husband, their eyes meeting with mutual understanding. All their anxiety had melted into gratitude. The Buddha had answered the question that had tormented her for years. Real practice is not running away from love and responsibilities, but remaining inwardly awake and free while living among them. The Buddha went on in his kind, steady voice. Every circumstance can be a gateway to practice. Whether one lives as a monastic or within a family, the essence is the same: to recognize and transform our own minds so we can uncover compassion and clarity. Your marriage is part of those conditions. It can serve the path. Recognize it, cherish it, and use it to deepen your understanding. You need not live in isolation to find truth. The test is whether you can keep your heart calm and open amid life's distractions. Those words permeated the hall with warmth, and all who heard them felt touched by a new perspective. People realized that spiritual development is not about crushing desire, but learning from it and cultivating compassion and insight. Sumati and her husband silently thanked the Buddha, their hearts settling into a peaceful acceptance. She no longer saw marriage and intimacy as barriers. Instead, she saw them as opportunities to grow, moments to practice mindfulness and love, rather than to retreat or suppress a part of herself. As the Buddha's teaching continued, the assembled crowd felt the atmosphere shift from tension to calm. Those once locked in debate relaxed. Lay followers who had juggled family duties and faith realized their own lives could be part of a profound spiritual journey. Monks dedicated to strict discipline also felt a gentle expansion of viewpoint, recognizing different paths share the same ultimate goal. Sumati and her husband, gazing quietly at each other, felt an unprecedented sense of harmony and gratitude. She had never experienced the practice as so close and accessible. It was as though she'd found a guiding light that dispelled her darkest fears. Eventually, the crowd dispersed. Some left the temple bowing in heartfelt thanks. Others lingered in quiet reflection. The Buddha sat, meeting the eyes of each one with compassion. Whether people strove for freedom from mental unrest or yearned to reconcile daily obligations with their spiritual aspirations, his teaching had become a luminous lantern for all. Sumati and her husband returned home, resuming life's routines, cooking, chores, caring for the children. Yet her heart was forever changed. Every conversation, each moment of warmth with her husband, now she recognized them as part of her spiritual learning. She saw that a tense or impatient moment was a chance to examine her own reactions and cultivate patience and understanding. Their home life remained outwardly the same, but inwardly everything was transformed. She and her husband now saw one another as partners, not just in marriage, but on the path to deeper self-awareness. Each disagreement or burst of frustration became a practice space. Each moment of care became a reminder that love, compassion, and insight can flourish precisely in the midst of everyday life. Before long, word of that day's teaching spread throughout the kingdom. People told stories about Sumati and her husband with admiration, how they discovered a way to reconcile family life and spiritual growth. Many lay practitioners found solace and inspiration in this example, realizing that practice doesn't always require leaving society behind. They learned to see their own homes, jobs, and relationships as opportunities to cultivate kindness and inner freedom. The Buddha's parable of the lotus took root in people's hearts. A lotus arises from the depths of muddy water, but opens into a pure blossom. The imagery beautifully mirrors our human journey, living in a world pulsing with temptations, anxieties, and responsibilities, yet preserving our natural clarity and goodness through mindful awareness. The Buddha's words became a gentle stream of wisdom, forever echoing in people's minds and reminding them that true practice is an ongoing awakening in each passing moment. Whether cooking a meal, comforting a child, or lying awake at night, we can practice letting go of clinging, seeing through illusions, and touching the quiet center within. For Sumati and her husband, life continued, but no longer weighed down by doubt over whether marriage was at odds with the path. They now saw that every circumstance, every joy, sorrow, success, and disappointment could be an occasion to practice. This did not mean indulging in every desire without reflection. It meant facing their longings honestly, learning from each challenge, and watching carefully whenever the mind strayed into selfishness, impatience, or fear. By acknowledging those impulses, they gradually found the power to transcend them. Over time, this teaching was discussed in households, among scholars, and in local gatherings. Spirituality was no longer viewed solely as an ascetic enterprise, but as a living human journey open to anyone willing to seek truth in everyday experiences. The Buddha's focus on the lotus made a profound impression. Even though it thrives in murky water, it remains fresh and spotless. This reality guided many to trust they could carry out work and family commitments while still nurturing compassion and a tranquil spirit. Desire itself was not labeled an evil to be crushed. Rather, it became a mirror to see our own hearts more clearly. Indeed, it showed us where we were clinging, and thus where we could loosen our grip to find liberation. The Buddha's teaching showed that no matter our situation, we can all follow a path of deeper awareness. Spiritual growth doesn't require shutting out the world. It calls for understanding ourselves and uplifting our minds here and now. Each moment in life is a chance to practice. Each time we speak kindly, each time we reflect on a mistake, every time we find the courage to choose compassion over anger. These are the real steps on the path. In a modern, fast-paced world, it's still possible to remain calm and awake within. Like the lotus that emerges from muddy waters unspoiled, we too can live in the midst of life's turbulence and yet remain clear and free. In that teaching, the Buddha reassured everyone that we do not practice by escaping reality. We practice by gently rising above harmful cravings through wisdom and love. Marriage, friendship, family, and community all are not barriers but part of a living tapestry, giving us endless chances to hone our insight and grow our hearts. When we hold on to this simple yet profound truth, we can live in the world and also discover the peace beyond it, just as the lotus remains shining and pure, even as it stands in the mud.